has given you the information that mistakenly it has been exchanged. The today's class was MPSE 003, but we had prepared for MPSE 007, and we shall take the MPSE 007 social movement topic and Unity 13. In previous two classes, we had completed from Unit 1 to Unit 12. Today, we shall complete the rest of the units, that is from Unit 13 to Unit 17. Unit 13 relates to agrarian movements. Agrarian movement. Agrarian, you know, we shall start the class. The agrarian movement are generally economic in nature. Agrarian relates to agricultural workers, particularly peasants movement, Krusaka Andolana. Not particularly the farmers and farmer related people, group of people who are engaged in collective action. You know, movement refers to collective action of a group of people. Movement relates to the collective action of a group of people, a section of people to resolve their grievances or inconveniences, discrimination, and all these things. So, agrarian movements relates to peasants movement in India. We are studying the movement, social movements, particularly in our state, that is India. Agrarian movements are
Excuse me,
general.
sir.
Sir, slide is not.
The present,
Sir,
yes, slide is not visible,
sir,
and someone has clicked on present now button. Don't click. All I request you not to click on any present now button. Okay,
sir.
sir, you can click on present now button and share this slide.
Sir, is it visible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir,
Visible. Now you can continue.
sir. Agrarian movements, Unit 13, agrarian movements relates to the movements of the agricultural section of people in our state, that is in India. Agrarian movements are generally economic in nature, but in number of movements, social issues like self-respect, dignity, gender, gender-based discrimination are involved. Why agrarian movement? What is called agrarian movement? Movement, you know, the collective action of a section of people to resolve their inconveniences and their grievances or discrimination, whatever it may be, through through a movement, through, you may call agitation, you may call petitioning, you may call the constitutional means of protest, all these things, that is called the movement. And agrarian movement particularly refers to the agrarian classes, means the agricultural related classes of people. You know, agrarian society is not a homogeneous unit. It is divided on economic and social basis. Agrarian classes ର କୌଣସି ଗୋଟିଏ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ସେକ୍ସନ କୁ ଆମେ ବୁଝୁ ନାହୁଁ। ଏହା ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଦିଗରୁ ଏହାକୁ ଅନୁଶୀଳନ କରାଯାଇଛି ବା କୃଷି କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ସମ୍ବନ୍ଧିତ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାରରେ ନିୟୋଜିତ ହେଇଥିବା जनसाधारण बा मानव गोष्ठी को agrarian society बोली कहा जाउछि. In other words, these are the movements of the agricultural laborers, poor and small peasants, tenants, sharecroppers, bhagachasi, farmers, rich peasants, rural rich, those who are directly or indirectly related to agricultural sector. Agricultural sector related people who are engaged in collective action to resolve their grievances is known as agrarian movement. The issues taken up in the agrarian movements are generally economic in nature. But in several cases, both the economic and social nature are involved. Both economic and social. For example, the case of Dalits and women, the economic and social self-respect, dignity, and gender-based discrimination are involved. So that agrarian movement, though it economic in nature, social angle, we can study these movements from social angle also. Agrarian society is not a homogeneous unit. It is divided on economic and social basis. The mobilization of an agrarian group depends on the specific issues related to it. The collaboration between different groups or conflict among them also depend on the convergence of the group interests. In order to understand the movements of different agrarian classes, it is necessary to discuss the criteria to designate a particular class. Agrarian classes can be studied from Marxian and non-Marxian framework. Agrarian classes can be studied from the Marxian and non-Marxian framework. Marxian framework, you know, it is based particularly on the class sector, class related society. Class, you know, Marx sees that the society is always divided into two classes. One class is ownership class, means those who own the arable land or agricultural land or cultivable land, ଚାଷ ଜମିର ମାଲିକ ଥିବା ଗୋଟିଏ ଶ୍ରେଣୀ ଗୋଟେ ପାଖରେ, ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଶ୍ରେଣୀ ହଉଛନ୍ତି those who are laborers, agricultural related laborers, those who are not the owner class, they are working in the agricultural field, but they are not the owner classes. So that Karl Marx has divided society in into two classes on the basis of ownership of agricultural land. Here, the agrarian society, from the Marxian angle, we can trace two classes on the basis of ownership of agricultural land. ଚାଷ ଜମିର ମାଲିକ ଥିବା ଗୋଟେ ଶ୍ରେଣୀ, ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଶ୍ରେଣୀ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ଚାଷ ଜମିରେ କେବଳ ଶ୍ରମିକ, ଏଗ୍ରିକଲଚରାଲ ଲେବରର୍ସ ଥିବା ଗୋଟିଏ ଶ୍ରମିକ। ଏମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଯୋଉ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟ conflict among these two groups for the purpose of group interest, that is called agrarian movement. or collective action or mobilization of the agrarian groups. Another is non-Marxian framework, that is traditionally interpreted classes, that to differentiate peasantry is to see the proportion of family labor power in relation to the outside labor power in working on the land along with the ownership of the land. Marxian framework has been further extended by Lenin, then Mao Zedong. But the other framework consider that the outside labor are categorized as rural rich peasants, so that these rich peasants along with the small farmers, marginal farmers, agricultural laborers are only one group, but they have separate interests and they antagonize themselves, so that these two are. The agrarian groups are of two categories. Agrarian groups are divided into two different classes. One is rural poor. They can be otherwise termed as agricultural laborers, and small poor marginal peasants. Second class is farmers, middle peasants, pulkas, rich peasants, rural rich. Marxian approach to study agrarian movement is that poorer agrarian classes get mobilized against their exploitation by the exploiting classes. Marx says that the ownership class, those who have the ownership over the agricultural lands, always exploit the agricultural workers, laborers, and they have no ownership, they are exploited. So, in order to protest the exploitation, there is movement. Amongst all regions of the country witnessed agrarian movements during the pre-independence period. The rural poor, agricultural laborers, we can further explain the rural poor. Who are the rural poor? Agricultural laborers who do not have the ownership over their land, always engage in the land of other people for wages, either as agricultural labor or tenants. Small, poor, marginal peasants have land, but it is not enough to meet the basic needs. They have to work on other lands also. Agricultural laborers, ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଯେହେତୁ ଜମି ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନଙ୍କ ନିକଟରେ ମାଲିକାନା ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନଙ୍କ ନିକଟରେ ଅଦରୱାଇଜ ଏନଗେଜମେଣ୍ଟ ପାଇଁ କୌଣସି ସ୍କୋପ ନାହିଁ, ତେଣୁ ସେମାନେ ଧନିକ ଶ୍ରେଣୀର ଜମି କୃଷି କ୍ଷେତ୍ରର ମାଲିକ ମାନଙ୍କ ଦ୍ୱାରରେ ମୂଲ ଲାଗିଲେ ସେମାନେ ହେଉଛନ୍ତି rural poor. So also marginal peasants, they are also rural poor, because the marginal peasants have a small amount of agricultural land, but it is not sufficient for them to meet their livelihood, so that they engage themselves in other land as tenants or agricultural laborers. So they are also included as rural poor. And another group is farmers, middle peasants, rich peasants, all these things. These classes own land and other required paraphernalia in agriculture. They work on their own land and do not work themselves except doing the supervisory work along with the enjoying agriculture. These class farmers, they are rich and they are also middle class peasants. They have their sufficient agricultural land, sufficient agricultural equipments also. They never work, but they only supervise the work of agricultural laborers. That is the class definition of farmers, middle peasants or rural rich. So that
Hello? Hello? Students, am I audible to you? Sir is not audible? Okay. Okay, please wait. Sauri Prasad Bari. Who is Sauri Prasad Bari? Some of you are trying disturbing the class. Some of you are switching on the audio and video. Priyanka Dubey, why are you presenting? Stop presenting. Priyanka Dubey, stop presenting. Please wait. There is some technical problem. Sir will be joining again. Okay, sir. Is it audible to you?
Sir.
Oh, actually, it was not audible. So
Sir.
now you can start the class, but your presentation is not available. Sir, please click on presentation present now, then you can start.
Sir. Sir, visible है कि sir? Hello, sir.
Okay, sir.
Hello. Sir, visible
Yes, sir.
होगी?
Yes, sir. It's
Sir.
okay. Okay. Okay now.
Sir. The agrarian groups are divided into two different classes. One is rural poor. Rural poor includes agricultural laborers and small poor marginal peasants. Agricultural laborers means those who have no land of agriculture of their own. So they are the rural poor. So also the marginal peasants. Marginal peasants means the peasants who have a little amount of agricultural land, but it is not sufficient to meet their livelihood for the entire year. So they work as laborers in other land owners, agricultural land. These section also include in rural poor. Another group, another class is known as farmers, rich peasants, middle class peasants. These group, the the nature and character of this group is that this group, this class has much more agricultural land. They don't work in their agricultural land. They only supervise the work of the agricultural laborers and marginal peasants. They have sufficient land, agricultural land. They have also sufficient agricultural implements also. Next, we shall see the peasant movement or agrarian movement during pre-independence period. During British rule, there were number of agricultural laborers mobilization. The agrarian movements during the pre-independence period, popularly known as peasant movement. Peasant movement. These movements are these movements involved all exploited classes, tenants, agricultural laborers, artisans, all those involved in agriculture, agrarian movement or peasants movement. We can cite a number of, we can say the instances of a number of movement during British India, during British rule in India, Wadha peasant movement in Uttar Pradesh, Kheda peasant movement in Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Mopila in Malabar, Kerala, Champaran peasant movement in Bihar, Wahabi, Harabi, Telbaga in West Bengal, Telangana. All these are the instances of popular peasant movement in India. During British period, the landlords, money lenders, and other exploiting classes always exploited the rural poor agricultural laborers and marginal peasants. The issues The issues raised in these movements were related to the nature of agrarian relations. These relations were built on the exploitation of the agrarian classes, means the farmers, rich peasants, rural rich, by these classes, and they exploited to the rural poor, particularly the agricultural laborers, the marginal peasants, the tenants, the sharecroppers, and the artisans. In order to meet the requirement of the colonial forces and to satisfy their feudal needs, the landlords exploited the rural poor in several ways. These included unreasonable increase in the rent. जो भागचाषी माने जो कृषि श्रमिक माने जमीदार मानक बा धनिक श्रेणीर बहु परिमाण रे जमी मालिकाना थिबा धनी कृषक मानक कृषि क्षेत्र रे कार्य करुथले सेमानक ऊपर विभिन्न प्रकार कर बसाइतला यू नो ड्यूरिंग ब्रिटिश पीरियड the land revenue administration was very peculiar. कृषि क्षेत्र जेते जमी थिला these agricultural lands were divided into three type of ownership. तीन स्तरीय मालिकाना थिला. प्रथम स्तर सर्वोच्च मालिकाना थिले निजे सरकार ब्रिटिश सरकार भारत रे. द्वितीय स्तर गोटे इंटरमीडिएरी ओनरशिप क्लास थे दे आर नोन एज जमीदार श्रेणी द लैंडलॉर्ड क्लासेस सेमानक निकटरे हजार हजार संपत्तिर कृषि क्षेत्र कृषि जमीर मालिकाना सत्व थिला एवं सभा तले थिले रयत जो मानक पाखरे वास्तव रे कोनोसी जमीर मालिकाना थिला सेमाने केवल वर्ष को किछि परिमाणर खजना बा रेंट देकरी निज जमी को चाष करुले. तेणु ब्रिटिश सरकार कृषि क्षेत्र पाई गोटे पैसा भी खर्च न करी जमीदार मानक माध्यम रे विपुल परिमाणर कृषि राजस्व आदाय करुले. सेतिपाई ब्रिटिश सरकार कोनोसी खजना कृषि क्षेत्र उपरे बसौनथले ड्यूरिंग ब्रिटिश रूल and it was the landlords who exploited them in several ways, who exploited the agricultural laborers, marginal laborers, peasants in several ways. These include what type of exploitation? Unreasonable increase in the rent, forces gifts, beggar means बेठी बिना पारिश्रमिक रे श्रम दान करने को जाए बेगर, फोर्स्ड लेबर, फिजिकल टर्चर, इनसिक्यूरिटी ऑफ टेन्यूर, एविक्शन. जो समय रे जमीदार चाहूले से समय रे कृषि क्षेत्र नाम को मात्र मालिकाना पाई कृषि श्रमिक बा नाम मात्र कृषक पाखु मालिकाना सत्व छड़े ना जाए एविक्शन उच्छेद कर. These problems were compounded by natural calamities like famines, flood, drought, commercialization of crops, indebtedness. ता संग को बड़ी पड़ुथला विलेज मनी लेंडर, गाँ साहूकार महाजन मानकर दौरात्म्य जो माने बहु परिमाणर सुध सह करज दौले कृषक मान चाष कार्य करने. It was such type of exploitation. To protest such type of exploitation, the peasants all over the country mobilized, went into collective action, and the instances are there. And during the post-independence period, स्वाधीनता हासिल कला परे भारत रे still this type of exploitation persists. एई भली प्रकार शोषण मध्य चाली थिला, though it was minimized to some extent. Certain developments were noticed during post independence period. स्वाधीनता हासिल कला परे certain developments in Indian political economy of the post independence era can provide landmarks about the genesis and decline of agrarian movements. कमी जाइथिला. These are the policy measures introduced by the state during 1950s, both at the national and provincial levels, to bring about agrarian transformation through land reforms. भू संस्कार आईन स्वाधीन भारत सरकार प्रणयन करथिले, मीन्स the government of free India abolished जमींदारी सिस्टम, चाष जहार मालिकाना ताहार, अर्थात मझिरे जो जमीदारी व्यवस्था थिला सरकार ताकू स्वाधीन भारत सरकार ताकू उच्छेद करथिले, abolition of जमीदारी लैंड लॉर्ड सिस्टम. त्या द्वारा कृषक मानकर जमी हरैबार भय संपूर्ण भाव में चली जाइथिला. There was agrarian transformation, परिवर्तन होइथिला. So also, in order to rescue the Indian peasants, Indian farmers from the clutches of village land, village money lenders, गाँ साहूकार और महाजन मानक कबलरू भारतर कृषि और कृषक को रक्षा करने पाई the government of India, the government of the free India also nationalized the financial institutions known as banks, and also took a policy, a bold step to force the banks for institutional finance with a nominal interest to peasants. कृषि कार्य पाई बैंक गुडी को घरोई मालिकाना थिबा बैंक गुडी को जातीयकरण करा जायतिला. स्वाधीन भारत सरकार जातीयकरण कर देथिले एवं बैंक गुडी को निर्देश देथिले कृषि एवं कृषकक पाई नाममात्र सुधरे नॉमिनल इंटरेस्ट रे अर्थ ऋण जोगेदा पाई इंस्टीट्यूशनल फाइनेंस, सो दैट दे never want the money from or loan from the village money lenders. That was the another reform. So also there was vast opportunity was created for the irrigation facilities. Irrigation means supply of water to agricultural land throughout the year or partially for a particular crop, means धान चाष पाई 6 मास जल बा 3 मास जल बा कोनोसी जमी को वर्ष सारा जल जोगाण. रेन फेड during British rule there was rain fed agriculture, वर्षा जल उपरे कृषि कार्य निर्भर करथला. But after the India got independence, the government of India, New India, the Free India, took established various irrigation projects, and number of a sizable amount of agricultural land were supplied the agricultural facilities. So also there was high yielding variety. High yielding means कृषि उत्पादन क्षम उन्नत बिहन हाई यील्डिंग बिहन बोली जहाँ कह जाए से सब जोगाण होता. ता सहित कृषि कार्य पाई एग्रीकल्चरल इम्प्लीमेंट्स बा कृषि जंत्रपातिर प्रयोग पाई सरकार सुजोग सृष्टि करथिले. ता सहित कृषि कार्य को केमिकल फर्टिलाइजर पेस्टिसाइड सब जोगैथिले एवं मार्केट सिस्टम, गवर्नमेंट क्रिएटेड द मार्केट सिस्टम to sell the agricultural products in a better value, so that there was agrarian transformation during post independence period. ସ୍ୱାଧୀନ ଭାରତରେ କୃଷି ଆଉ କୃଷକଙ୍କ ମାନଙ୍କର ବ୍ୟାପକ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ହେଇଥିଲା, ତେଣୁ सोशल मूवमेंट रो मात्रा कमी जाइथिला, सोशल मूवमेंट रो मात्रा कमी जाइथिला. The developments have resulted in emergence of a new set of issues, rise of new agrarian classes and decline of a. But during the implementation of globalization, 1991 मसीह रे जो ग्लोबलाइजेशन, प्राइवेटाइजेशन, लिबरलाइजेशन इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया इंप्लीमेंट कले, ता द्वारा जो ट्रेडिशनल क्लास ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर बा एग्रारियन ग्रुप थिले तार रूप चरित्र आकार प्रकार सब परिवर्तन हो गला. ये ग्लोबलाइजेशन अडॉप्ट कला परे there was emergence of a new set of issues, rise of a new agrarian classes and decline of erstwhile classes, new types of organizations and patterns of political mobilization. The movements of different agrarian classes, you know, these classes are agricultural laborers, poor and small peasants, and farmer middle class peasants, and rural poor, agricultural laborers and small poor. The rural poor is a conglomerate of the poorer classes, landless agricultural laborers, tenants, poor, small and marginal farmers who own economic land holdings and supplement their income by informal non-agrarian sectors. Farmers movement, you know, farmers movement sections of the country which have benefited from the green revolution. Green revolution could be achieved. India after independence adopted annual planning, so also 5-year planning, 5-year term planning. Prathama Panchavarshiya Yojana for 5 years. Second 5-year plan, third 5-year plan. These 3 5-year plans focused on revolution in the field of agriculture. That is termed as green revolution. Revolution means revolutionary production, secured production in the field of agriculture, massive production. They were the movements of rural rich, which included rich peasants, landlords, and self-cultivating middle peasants, in which the middle peasants had the preponderance. These groups had benefited from the land reforms, including the abolition of landlordism. Socially, the middle or intermediate castes, Jats, Gujars, Jadavs, Muslim, high castes in UP, Marathas in Maharashtra. These are upper classes, agrarian classes. The agricultural laborers and poor small peasants have been mobilized into collective actions throughout the post-independent era in different states of India by different kinds of organizations. This included the socialist and communist parties, Gandhian voluntary groups, NGOs, independent individuals and Naxalites. The subsection discusses some examples of movements of agrarian classes which form the rural poor. You know, the first 2 decades following independence saw the movements of rural poor in Uttar Pradesh by the socialists and communists on the one hand and by the Naxalites and the Communist Party of India on the other hand. The issues on which they were mobilized in the western Uttar Pradesh included redistribution of the Gaon Samaj land, abolition of beggar means free labor system, giving better wages, lifting of the sanction imposed by the rich classes on the poor classes for cutting grass, indeed as fodder from the fields of the farmer, and protection of the women of the poorer classes from the exploitation of the men belonging to the richer classes. I had told you earlier that the agrarian movement is economic in nature, but it has a number of social angles. It has also a number of social angles. The forms of protest included hunger strike, demonstration, etc. The 1960s also saw the mobilization of Dalits by Republican Party of India, which unlike the BSP of the latter period took up the cultural issues along with the economic problems. Besides, there are innumerable examples of the protest of the agricultural laborers and poor small peasants in the form of informal group organizations. Everyday forms of resistance could be noticed. So you could find the traditional left and socialists were unable to mobilize Dalits in several parts of country, some areas of Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Odisha. This was because of their neglect of Dalit question. Though the socialists showed concern for the caste, their focus were the backward caste, not the Dalits. The lacuna of the conventional left was corrected by the Naxalites in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar and Odisha. Their ability to combine the economic issues with the caste disabilities enabled them to mobilize the low caste agricultural laborers and poor peasants. So there were a number of agrarian movements in the post-independence period. Till recently, all Naxalite organizations did not participate in the elections. Now some of them all do take part in elections. Among the most important Naxal outfits are, you know, PWG, People's War Group in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar Pradesh, Kisan Sabha and Marxist Coordination Committee. Recently especially funded by the World Bank, taking recourse to Gandhian means of protest. These movements emerged have alternative mode of movements, concerned individuals, civil society organizations, voluntary organizations, and NGOs are playing significant roles in such movements. Narmada Bachao Andolan, led by Medha Patkar, is one of the most important examples of such type of movements. Farmers movement, farmers movement during post independence India, you know, Bharatiya Kisan Union, the 2 decades of last century, the The 60s and 70s witnessed the movements of a section which is known by different names: farmers, middle class peasants, kulkas, rich peasants, or rural rich. These movements had their own organizations and leadership. These movements were those of the separate organizations of the same name, the Bharatiya Kisan Union (BKU), led by Bhupinder Singh Maan in Punjab and by Mohinder Singh Tikait in Uttar Pradesh, and Sekari Sangathan by Sharad Joshi in Maharashtra. Of Karnataka Rajya Raita Sangha led by Professor Nijauddin Swami. These are the number of examples of agrarian movements or peasant movements in the first half of the post-independence India. These movements shared certain characteristics. They emerged in prosperous regions of the country, which have benefited from the Green Revolution. They were the movements of rural rich, which included rich peasants, landlords, self-cultivating labour. These groups had benefited from the land reforms, including the abolition of landlordism. Socially, the middle or intermediate castes of different regions formed the largest composition of them, unlike the peasant movements of the pre-independence period. Their issues and demands are related to market economy like remunerative prices of the agricultural produce, subsidized inputs, reduction in the electricity bills. The demands, these were the demands, increase in the time of availability of electricity. They are apolitical or non-political character, claim to represent the rural interests against urban India on the plea that Bharat is exploited by India. They overlook the division of this rural society and project themselves to be the representative of the entire rural society. They were being led by a new kind of leadership. They raise new type of issues, etc. Of these movements, the BKU movement in Uttar Pradesh deserves special discussion for different reasons. It was the Bharat versus India. Sharad Joshi was the champion of this concept. Genesis of the farmers movement. Since farmers movement are the post-Green Revolution movements are largely occurred in the Green Revolution belt. They found the term of trade against the agricultural sector. The rising cost of input in agriculture, कृषि क्षेत्र रे जो विपुल पुंजी निवेश होउची से तुलना रे मूल्य सेमानकु मिलु नथुबारु विभिन्न प्रकार दाबी सेमाने उपस्थापन करिथिले. Reduction in electricity bill, reduction in irrigation taxes were demands of the farmers.
I think it's not audible. Is it audible to you?
And also the subsidized.
Sir, voice is breaking. Sir, your voice is breaking. No sound. Okay. Okay, just wait. Let me recall him. Okay, so I think there is some technical problem. Please wait. Okay, students, please wait. Due to some technical problem, audio is not coming. So I have just called him. Sir will be coming right now. Okay, please wait.
Hello,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Yes, sir. Audible now.
Sir.
Manorama Pani. Manorama, please mute your audio. Oh, let me make him out. Manorama. Manorama Pani. Okay, let me. Okay. Okay, I have removed.
Sir. Sir, presentation ta visible होगी ना?
Now visible, sir.
Sir.
Okay, sir, you can continue now.
Sir. Sorry, my dear learners, there is technical problem, so that there was a disruption, interruption. We can resume it. Unit 13 last, the globalization and farmers movement. The farmers movement during pre-independence period. We could,
Sir, 1 minute. Vishwajit Shetty, why do you click? Why do you click on present now button? Vishwajit Shetty. ସେ ଆଉଥରେ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ ନାଓ ବଟନ କ୍ଲିକ୍ କଲା ପରେ ଆପଣଙ୍କ ହଟିଗଲା ଆଉଥରେ ଏ ପିଲାଟା କିଛି ଜାଣୁନାହାନ୍ତି ବିଶ୍ୱଜିତ ସେଠୀ ଟପ୍ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟିଂ ଓ ବିଶ୍ୱଜିତ ସେଠୀ ଟପ୍ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟିଂରେ ଷ୍ଟପ୍ କର ତମ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ ବଟନ କ୍ଲିକ୍ କରିବାକୁ କହୁଛି ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ ନାଓ ବଟନ କ୍ଲିକ୍ କରିବନି କେବେ କହିଲି ସାର୍ ଆଉଥରେ କରନ୍ତୁ ତାହେଲେ ପିଲାର ମଝିରେ ଆସିକି କ୍ଲିକ୍ କରିଦେଉଛନ୍ତି ସେଇଟା ଅସୁବିଧା ହେଉଛି ଆଉ ବିଶ୍ୱଜିତ ସେଠୀ ଭିଡ଼ିଓ ଅଫ୍ କର କିଛି ଜାଣିପାରୁନ କ'ଣ ପିଲା ବନ୍ଧୁ ତମେ କାହିଁ ସବୁ ଡିଷ୍ଟର୍ବାନ୍ସ କାହିଁ କ୍ରିଏଟ୍ କରୁଛ ଛୋଟ ପିଲା ନା କ'ଣ ସବୁ ସାର୍ ଆଉ ଥରେ ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ ନା ବଟନ କ୍ଲିକ୍ କରିଦେବେ
ହଁ ସାର୍ କରୁଛି
ସାର୍
सर विजुअल है ला
ओके सर ओके सर
ग्लोबलाइजेशन and farmers movement, the farmers movement or the social movement of agrarian classes can be divided into three period. One during pre-independence period, another is post-independence period, another is in the globalization period. Globalization in India was started from the year 1991. During globalization period, the peasants movement, the agrarian action group, the nature and character was changed. There was the issues related to globalization in the peasant movement attitude. The attempt of the Western countries, especially to interfere in the agrarian economy of India through the Dunkel draft and GATT, evoked different reactions from the farmers movement, while Saroj Joshi, leader from Maharashtra, supported the globalization. Two support leaders, Professor Nanju Daswamy of Karnataka, Mahendra Singh Tikait of BKU in Uttar Pradesh opposed it. Saroj Joshi argued that opening of Indian agriculture to the world competition would benefit Indian farmers. His perspective helped him to become an advisor to the government of India during the regime of Vishwanath Pratap Singh, the ex-prime minister. The opponents of globalization, Nanju Swamy and Mahendra Singh Tikait, got support of academic activists like Bandana Shiva, and a large number of socialists and Gandhians. They argued that globalization would not only expose the Indian farmers to the unequal competition with European farmers, an attempt to change the patent laws about seeds would deprive them of their traditional rights over the preservation and generation of seeds. They opposed the attempt of the government to change the patent laws, demanded abrogation of the subsidies given by the European government to their farmers. They also opposed the multinational companies or corporations which used Indian natural resources like water to manufacture soft drinks. In fact, intellectuals like Bandana Shiva argue that modern technology popularized in green evolution has harmed the fertility of land rather than helping it. The opponents of the globalization organized rallies, demonstrations, and seminars to register their protest following the death of Professor Nanjuda Swami. The farmers' protest against globalization has got weakened. This was during the period of globalization, the farmers' movement or peasant movement or social movement. There are three period where the peasant movements occurred, the social movements occur in the agrarian sector. We studied it. So now we shall go to unit 14. Unit 14, we had completed unit 13. Unit 14 is about working class movement. Movement. Working class is a relatively modern organization of laborer and a relatively free market for laborer. The development of modern labor class was due to the establishment of modern factories, railways, dockyards, and construction activities relating to roads and buildings. You know, the modern working class arose in India in the 19th century. The modern working class arose in India in the 19th century. The modern working class arose in India in the 19th century. This development was due to the establishment of modern factories, railways, dockyards, and construction activities relating to roads and buildings. It was a modern working class in the sense of relatively modern organization of labor and a relatively free market for laborers. There are certain important exceptions to this rule. The plantation workers who also worked for the capitalist employers and produced goods which were sold in the international markets were recruited and worked under on free conditions. In fact, the workers in colonial India, the recruitment and working conditions were not as free or as were present in some other countries which are capitalistically more developed. So, what is working class movement? We can find out a definition. What is working class movement? Working class movement include trade union movements. Form of trade union movements are silent protests, passive resistance, individual protests, and strikes, as well as more organized forms of welfare activities and bigger protests and strikes reaching to the level of general strikes. It involves various kinds of reactions and responses of the workers to the industrial system. You know, the trade union movement is otherwise known as working class movement. They are different in the sense that the working class movement is much broader phenomenon and cover all kinds of movements including workers. It includes within its ambit silent protests as we have discussed. These reactions may be to ameliorate the working and living conditions within the industrial system. What is their aim and objective? ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ ଉଦ୍ଦେଶ୍ୟ ହେଉଛି ଯେଉଁଠାରେ ସେମାନେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ସେ ସ୍ଥାନରେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଅଧିକ ସୁବିଧା ସୁଯୋଗ ମିଳିବା, ଲିଭିଂ କଣ୍ଡିସନ, ୱାର୍କିଂ କଣ୍ଡିସନ ଏବଂ ମୋର ଜଷ୍ଟଫୁଲ ୱେଜ ଏ ସବୁ ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ମିଳିବା ପାଇଁ ଏବଂ ସର୍ଭିସ ସିକ୍ୟୁରିଟି, ସର୍ଭିସ କଣ୍ଡିସନ ସହିତ ପୋଷ୍ଟ ସର୍ଭିସ ବେନିଫିଟ ଏଗୁଡ଼ିକ ହାସଲ କରିବା ପାଇଁ there are number of trade union movements. Trade union means the union of working class. Trade union means the union of working class who went for collective actions to resolve their resentments regarding the amelioration of the better working condition, better service condition. It covers the activities and movements of the workers within the capitalist system as well as those opposed to it. Trade union movement, on the other hand, accepts the industrial system as given, but attempts to make it more human, more amenable to the needs of the workers. It tries to reform the working and living conditions of the workers within the industrial system. The short-term and long-term working of the trade unions is geared towards making the workers more committed to the industrial work while agitating for higher wages, suitable working conditions, stable housing, and reasonable credit system. The classic definition of the trade unions still holds good as formulated by Sydney and Beatrice Way. What is trade union? A trade union is a continuous association of wage earners. Define it. A trade union is a continuous association of wage earners for the purpose of maintaining or improving the conditions of their employment. Trade union ର ଅର୍ଥ ହେଉଛି, ଡେଫିନେସନ ହେଉଛି, ସଂଜ୍ଞା ହେଉଛି ଏହା ଏକ ନିରବଚ୍ଛିନ୍ନ ସଂଗଠନ। କାହାର? ୱେଜ ଇଅର୍ନର୍ସ, ମୂଲ ମଜୁରୀ ଲାଗୁଥିବା ଏବଂ ନିଜର ଗୁଜୁରାଣ ମେଣ୍ଟାଇବା ପାଇଁ ଶ୍ରମ ଦାନ କରୁଥିବା ଶ୍ରମିକ ମାନଙ୍କର ଏହା ଏକ ନିରବଚ୍ଛିନ୍ନ ଧାରାବାହିକ ସଂଗଠନ। While labor movement may include various types of structures, pre-industrial or modern in nature, which coordinate the protest activities of the workers, the trade unions are generally hierarchical and bureaucratic, relying on a variety of functionaries with defined roles. There is a differentiation, ପ୍ରକାର ଭେଦ ରହିଛି labor movement and trade union movement. The trade union runs on the basis of continuous membership of land. The trade union runs on the basis of continuous membership of and regular contributions from workers. Although the trade unions are hierarchical, these hierarchies are not fixed but are based on the acceptance of democratic principles of equality and elections. Thus, The working class movement is a much larger phenomenon which includes the trade unions. However, it can be said that the trade unions are the most organized and modern expression of the labor movement. Working class movement कहले केवल ट्रेड यूनियन मूवमेंट को बुझौ नहीं, ट्रेड यूनियन सहित अन्य श्रमिक संगठन जो प्रोटेस्ट रैली सेमानंकर दाबी गुड़िक सेमानंकर लक्ष्य सेमानंकर उद्देश्य हासिल पाई सेमानंकर सुविधा सुजोग हासिल पाई जो धारावाहिक आंदोलन सब होईची सेगुडी को बुझौची तेणु ट्रेड यूनियन इज ए नैरो कांसेप्ट ऑफ वर्किंग क्लास इट इनक्लूड्स लार्जर क्लासेस आल्सो development of capitalist enterprises working class is an integral part of capitalist economy. Working class is an integral part of the capitalist economy. पुंजीवाद अर्थनैतिक व्यवस्थार अंश विशेष ये से वर्किंग क्लास. Traces of capitalism were introduced in India in the 19th century under colonial dispensation. It was an ironic situation where the organization of production was capitalist, whereas the labor market was on free. Plantations and railways were the initial enterprises to herald the era of colonial capitalism in Indian subcontinent. A British company, the Assam Tea Company, was established in the year 1939 to set up tea gardens in Assam. Coffee plantations were started in South India. By 1940, companies which were organized along capitalist lines and produced for international market established these plantations. So, especially after revolt of 1857 जो सिपाही विद्रोह हितला, that was also marked the resentment of working class. The migration of the indentured labor, transport of raw material and manufactured goods within and outside the country became much easier. Port cities like Bombay, Calcutta, Madras became the centers of capitalist economy. Cotton mills in Bombay, jute mills in Calcutta, and several factories in Madras were set up in the late 19th century. Infrastructure background or basis of the colonial economy, capitalist economy in India were the instances. Workers' movement before the emergence of trade unions. Even before the emergence of trade unions and after the First World War, there have been various forms of labor movements and protests against low wages, long working hours, inhuman conditions of work, and several other issues were the resentments or grievances of working class. In fact, the trade unions can be seen as the result of these earlier labor struggles to secure their demands. The trade unions, however, were the most organized and advanced form of labor organization. When they emerged, although the plantations and mines contained a large number of workers who were heavily exploited, their conditions did not attract much attention in the initial period because they were far from the urban areas, away from the notice of early social reformers, journalists, and public activists. But despite this isolation, the plantation workers on their own registered their protests against the exploitation and oppression by the plantation owners and managers. So there was a number of working class movement after First World War. in other industrial centers like Calcutta, Ahmedabad, Kanpur, Madras, Nagpur, Surat, the situation was almost similar. The workers were slowly learning to protest and combine for the redress of their grievances. There were sporadic working class movement during that period, and after that there was the emergence and growth of trade unions. Emergence and growth of trade unions. The trade unions emerged in India after the First World War. It developed in the scientific context of colonialism and an underdeveloped economy. The problems of the developing economy still continue in the post-independence period. Post-independence period. The Madras Labour Union, formed in April 1918, is generally considered to be the first trade union in India. Madras Labour Union. Madras Labour Union is the first ever trade union in India, which was established in April 1918 1918 ମସିହାରେ. BP Wadia, a nationalist leader and an associate of Ani Besant, was instrumental for its organization. It was mainly an organization based on the workers of Carnatic and Buckingham mills in Madras. After that, in Ahmedabad, there were number of labor organizations and converted to trade unions. The trade union movement picked up momentum and many more unions were formed in many centers by 1920. According to an estimate, there were 125 trade union consisting of 2,50,000 working class members were the part of it. This was a fairly impressive growth by any standards, so that the trade union movement could be a nationwide phenomenon during that period. Thereafter, the All India National Level Trade Union, namely the All India Trade Union Congress, was formed in 1920 as a development of these trends towards union formation all over India. It was a trade union of trade unions. The provincial trade unions formed a national level trade union, namely All India Trade Union Congress AITUC in 1920. Many people connected with the labor realized that there was a need for a central organization of labor to coordinate the works of the trade unions all over India. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, N.M. Joshi, B.P. Wadia, Dewan Chamanlal, Lala Lajpat Rai, Joseph Baptista, and many others were trying to achieve this goal. The formation of the International Labour Organization ILO in 1990 acted as a catalyst for it. It was felt that there should be a national organization of the trade unions whose nominees could be chosen to represent the Indian labor in ILO. Lala Lajpat Rai became the first president of the All India Trade Union Congress and Joseph Bastia its vice president. Motilal Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel were also present. the AITUC received a lot of support from the Indian National Congress. There were about 107 unions which were affiliated or sympathetic to, অর্থাৎ জাতীয় স্তরର ଶ୍ରମିକ ସଂଗଠନ ଟ୍ରେଡ୍ ୟୁନିୟନ ସଂଗଠନ ଯାହାକି ଯାହାର ସଦସ୍ୟ ହେଉଛନ୍ତି ଟ୍ରେଡ୍ ୟୁନିୟନ୍ସ ନଟ୍ ଇଣ୍ଡିଭିଜୁଆଲ ମେମ୍ବର୍ସ ସେମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ 107ଟା ସର୍ବଭାରତୀୟ ସ୍ତରର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରଦେଶରେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଥିବା 100 ପ୍ରୋଭିନ୍ସିଆଲ ଆଞ୍ଚଳିକ ସ୍ତରରେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଥିବା 107ଟା ଟ୍ରେଡ୍ ୟୁନିୟନ ମିଶିକରି AI ସର୍ବଭାରତୀୟ ଟ୍ରେଡ୍ ୟୁନିୟନ ସଂଗଠନ କରିଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ତାର କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଥିଲା ନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଲେଭେଲରେ ଟ୍ରେଡ୍ ୟୁନିୟନ କଂଗ୍ରେସର ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟକୁ ଅଧିକ ଶକ୍ତିଶାଳୀ କରିବା ଏବଂ ବିଶ୍ୱ ଇଣ୍ଟରନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଆନ୍ତର୍ଜାତିକ ଶ୍ରମିକ ସଂଗଠନରେ ନିଜର ପ୍ରତିନିଧିତ୍ୱକୁ ସଫଳ ଭାବରେ ଯାଇଥିଲେ। The Communist Party of India was formed abroad in Soviet Union in October 1920. M.N. Rai was the moving force behind this. Soon after the formation of CPI, Communist Party of India, the communists became active in the labor movements. Bombay and Calcutta invited their particular attention due to labor concentration and earlier labor struggles in these cities. The communists organized the workers in cotton mills of Bombay and jute mills of Calcutta. Besides many other industries and led militant struggles. Militant means there were the armed struggle to achieve to redress their grievances. Due to their commitment to the cause of labor and their devotion to the organizational work, they were soon able to organize many new unions and gained ascendancy in the old ones. So, but there was a split in the AITUC because there was a number of split occurred in 1930, also in 1931 due to divergence between the nationalist and communist opinions. With the introduction of Communist Party of India in the trade union movement, labor union movement, the traditional leaders were not at one with them in terms of their attitude, in terms of their ideology, in terms of their activities, so that there were number of split. The communists severally criticized Gandhi and condemned the roundtable conference in which the Congress was participating. They wanted to pass a resolution to this effect. Unable to secure a majority for this, they walked out and formed another federation of trade unions called Red Trade Union Congress, RTUC. Thus, by 1931, there were 3 national federations of these unions: AITUC, IFTU, and RTUC. Indian Federation of Trade Unions, IFTU. There were number of split, division and political affiliation. As soon as the unity was achieved, the division resurfaced in the organization owing to the varying politics of the trade union leaders. The Second World War created this rift. Some of the trade union leaders led by M.N. Rai believed that the fascist countries were the main enemies and the democratic countries should be supported against them. But the majority of the trade union leaders comprising of the nationalists and communists in the initial stages, while agreeing with the opinion in principle, decided to remain neutral because Britain, which was in control of India, was not willing to promised independence to this country. So that in the post-war period, when the contours of national government was becoming apparent, the political rivalry within the trade unions became even more acute. The Congress tried to influence the AITUC and its unions to work along Gandhian lines and in support of the Congress. But by then the communist influence had grown very strong. The Congress leaders therefore decided to form its own union, own trade union organization. The foundation of the trade union in May 1947, the Indian National Trade Union Congress. The Congress led, Congress controlled, All India Congress, the first ever political outfit in India, which formed a new trade union of its own, namely the Indian National Trade Union Congress in May 1947. In 1948, the union leaders under the influence of Congress socialists came out of AITUC and formed the Hind Mazdoor Panchayat in 1949. Another organization called United Trade Union Congress was formed under the famous trade union leaders. The movement in the post-independence period. The post-independence period also saw the formations Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh BMS in 1955, affiliated to Jana Sangh, which was formed in 1950. You know, Jana Sangh is the first initial outfit of Bharatiya Janata Party. The Jana Sangh affiliated Jana Sangh ideology. On the basis of Jana Sangh ideology, there was another trade union, All India Trade Union, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh BMS, born in 1955. In the post-independence period, the state became the sole arbiter in the relationship between the industry and the working class. During this period, the main concern of government was to achieve growth, industrial peace, and proper management of the conflict between workers and the management. In order to achieve these goals, the state passed laws like Industrial Dispute Act 1947. 1947 ମସିହାରେ Industrial Dispute Act ପାସ୍ କରିଦିଆଗଲା and introduced the Labor Relations Bill, Trade Union Bills in 1949. ଏଭଳି legislation ଦ୍ୱାରା ट्रेड यूनियन एक्टिविटीज को अधिक लीगलाइज करागला. The economic recession in the late 1960s caused economic hardship for the workers in the Bombay province. It was reflected in the growing unemployment and financial burden of the workers. Inability of the traditional trade unions to solve problems of the working class provided a fertile ground for the birth and growth of Shiv Sena. Shiv Sena founded a trade union in the name of Bharatiya Kamgar Sena. It emerged as an alternative to the traditional trade unions, but Bharatiya Kamgar Sena divided the working class on the ethnic ground. It said that the problems of working class were caused by the large number of workers who had come from other regions of the country, especially from South India. So, the working class movement in India is constrained by several factors. Some scholars argue that organized working class forms a very small section of the working population in India. Therefore, there is no class politics in the country. Instead of Indian politics is a centrist politics. Such statements overlook the presence of a large number of trade unions and their mobilization in the working class from time to time. No doubt, the rise of identity politics based on class, caste, language, religion, tribe, regions, etc., especially from the last 2 decades of the 19th of the 20th century, pose serious challenges to unite the working class on their issues. The encouragement to the market with the decline role of the state as part of the globalization agenda has further relegated the issues of working class to the background. This is all about unit 14. Now another unit, that is unit 15, Fisher Holt's movement. Fisher Holt. You know, Fisher Holt. They are the class of people, the whose activity is to fishing. By fishing, they earn their livelihood, and their main activity, main work attitude is to engage themselves in fishing and rearing of fish. Fisher folk form a large section of Indian population. Nearly 12 million, nearly 12 million fisher people live mostly in coastal states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, West Bengal, Goa, Andaman Nicobar Islands, Pondicherry, Maharashtra, Gujarat. Still, they also reside in different parts apart from the coastal regions. They are also found in other areas of the country involved in the fisheries, ponds, and big tanks. Largely, fisher folks belong to the vulnerable groups of the society. Professor John Kurian argues that in some area of Tamil Nadu like Nagapatnam, fishing community is not poor, and generally they are better off than many other social groups. In 3 decades of the last century, there has been a considerable improvement in their economic conditions, but they remain outliers in cultural, social, and political terms. Political terms. The collective actions of fisher community was came to limelight at the time of several natural disasters like tsunami in 2006, 26th December 2006. The fisher community linked Indian economy to the world economy. The fisher community link Indian economy to the world economy through the export of the marine products. The fisher community, fisher folk are not homogeneous groups. They follow multiple religions. A large number of them belong to the low castes. Apart from the coastal regions, they are also found in other areas of country involved in the fisheries, ponds, and big tanks. Largely, fisher folks belong to the vulnerable groups of the society. There are two types of, there are different from many other, these fisher community are different from many other social groups in on the basis of ownership of vessels and employment of labor. The fisher folk can be divided into three groups: can be divided into three groups. One, fisher folk who own vessel and work with their families. Secondly, those who own these and employ other fisher folks, they include film stars, politicians, and other wealthy persons. And other wealthy persons. It means that the fisher folks who who have the fisher folk who have own vessel ନିଜର ଯାନ ଅଛି ଅର୍ଥାତ୍ ନିଜର ଡଙ୍ଗା ଇତ୍ୟାଦି ଇତ୍ୟାଦି ଯୋଉ ବୋଟ୍ ଫିସିଂ ପାଇଁ ଦରକାର ସେଗୁଡିକ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଅଛି ଜାଲ ଇତ୍ୟାଦି ତାର ଇକ୍ୱିପମେଣ୍ଟ ସବୁ ଅଛି ଏମାନେ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ଗୋଟେ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଗ୍ରୁପ ହଉଛନ୍ତି film star politicians. They are not fishers, they never belong to fisher community, but they have their infrastructure where the fishing community work. It is the second category. Third category is those who don't own them but work on other vehicles. So that there are three groups. Fisher folk depend on agents, intermediaries of traders, moneylenders, non-fisher folk, owners of trawlers and big boats. You know, fisher folk are generally the poor class people. They don't have much more financial ability to own the big trawlers and big boats known as vessels and the ship fishing equipments like net and other infrastructure. Mechanization began with the Indo-Norwegian project in 1953 in India, whereby mechanized fishing equipments were permitted to catch fish indiscriminately with the aim to increase fish catches and augment the production streams. Augment the production streams so that the dependence they are dependent on others. They are always victims of natural disaster. You know, fisher folks are disaster affected people. They are deprived of their house, vessels and lives. The super cyclone in Odisha in 1999 had affected the fisher folks there. The tsunami in December 26, 2004, which affected the coastal regions of South Asia and Southeast Asia, had the devastating impact on the residents and tourists of these regions. But these were fisher folks as a single group which were affected by tsunami. It is not only killed many of them and destroyed their vessels and residences. It disturbed their centuries old faith in the sea. It created far-reach ecosystem. So that the non-fisher folks were further encouraged to dominate fisheries in the 1990s in the light of globalization. You know, globalization started in the year 1991 and the MNCs, multinational companies, corporations invested a lot of capital in the fishing activities in the coastal regions of India, our country. They set up different organizations to fish from the sea and marine products, and they exported and the fishing folk and the fishing community, fisher community now lose their earlier or traditional identities, and a new character could be found during the process of globalization. And the MNCs exploited the MNCs, the profit making, as the profit making body always tried to exploit the fishing community, and so that the fisher group could resorted to the redressal of their resorted to several movements for redressal of their problems, redressal of their grievances. Eh, the fishing communities, are also affiliated to political parties. Without political affiliation, these small section of the people, as they felt, could not achieve their goal, so that they always tried to be organized, and with a party affiliation they uh, wanted to achieve something, achieve their demands from the government, and to protest the exploitation of MNC's multinational corporations during globalization. As a result, there were a number of collective actions known as social movement by the fishing communities. You could know during the globalization, the fishing community also faced multiple challenges in their means of livelihood, so that they organized themselves and uh, organized themselves and started a number of social movements. Issues, the fisher community has a number of issues regarding leadership, issues regarding organizations. The principal issues or demands on which the fishing community organized social movements are the participation of the fisher folks in fisheries and fishery management, sale and processing of harness catches, opposition to the introduction of travelers. Third demand is resource allocation and management of fisheries. Fourth is providing catamanage, boats, loans, grants, known as the infrastructure to have better fishing in the deep sea, rehabilitation in case of natural disasters, rehabilitation of fisher fishing communities who face loss or who face loss in their infrastructure, loss of their livelihood, loss of their life should be rehabilitated. A scheme of rehabilitation should be implemented was their demand. Exploitation by agents, traders, and money lenders. Other demands were problems arising out bilateral relations between neighboring countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. India's sea scope has a territorial limit, so that the fishermen who voyaged in the sea and without having any knowledge could pass the international sea boundaries and go enter into the boundary of other states are held by the other states. जो फिशरमैन माने जो माने माछ धरिया ପାଇଁ डीप सी दूर समुद्र को जाती प्रत्येक राष्ट्र गोटे सामुद्रिक बाउंडरी अच्छी इंटरनेशनल बाउंडरी अच्छी से बाउंडरी सीमा को पार हो जाए जदि कौन भूलवशत बा अजाणत कौन फिशरमैन चली जाए से अन्य राष्ट्र जे जे माने अनुप्रवेशकारी भाव में से गिरफ करा जाए एवं से विरुद्ध आईनगत कार्यानुष्ठान ग्रहण करा जाए एथुरु रक्षा पाइबा प्रोटेक्शन विभिन्न राष्ट्र जो मानक सहित भारतर जल सीमा रही सच स्टेट्स लाइक श्रीलंका बांग्लादेश पाकिस्तान एमान सहित गोटे लीगल सेटलमेंट रे भारत पहुंचा दरकार जहाद्वारा भूलवशत अन्य राष्ट्र जलराशि को जल सीमा को प्रवेश करथिबा फिशरमैन मानू निरापद रे भारत को फेराई अणा जाय परिबो यह होची तांकर डिमांड अन्यतम डिमांड थिला लीडरशिप इश्यू यू नो फिशर फोक बा फिशिंग कम्युनिटी रो लीडरशिप इश्यू रही लीडरशिप टू द फिशर फोक मूवमेंट्स इन साउथ इंडिया इज प्रोवाइडेड बाय चर्च फादर्स nuns intellectual academic activists student social activists professional social workers community organizers social and physical scientists many of them belong to the fisher folk communities they work in league with NGOs concerned with the socio-economic and ecological issues. Most important among them are Thomas Kocheri, Paul Aracal, Albert Parisalvia, Peter D. Cruz. They organized the fisher folk in Kerala in several occasions. Professor John Kurian is known to have provided leadership to the fisher folk as an intellectual academic activist. The leadership operates at two levels, local and national. Local level leadership, national level leadership. Some of the regional level provincial leaders have graduated to the status of national leaders of fisher folk. For example, Thomas Kacheri, a priest and the most towering leader of fisher folk movement of the 1980s, started his political activities in Trivandrum district. In order to redress the demands of fisher folk, some of the regional provincial leaders organized collective actions of fishing community known as social movement of fisher folk. The organizations can be seen first attempt to form fisher folk organization at village, state and national levels in India were made in 1960s and 70s. सर्वप्रथम जो फिशर संगठन प्रतिष्ठा होता 1963 मसीह इन क्विलियन डिस्ट्रिक्ट इन केरला. In 1980s, the unions were formed in Alleppey, Cochin, Trivandrum and Malabar districts in Kerala. There was a direct linkage between the Roman Catholic Church and the leadership of these organizations with the fisher folk organizations. But it was only in 1990 and 1980 and 1990 that these organizations mobilized fisher folk into a movement. प्रथम फिशर मानकर आंदोलन होइथिला 1980 दशक बा 90 एवं 90 दशक रे. There were fisher folk unions in other coastal states like Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal. But it was in Kerala where they were most assertive and articulate. Kerala Swatantra Malsaya Thojialadi Federation KSMTF or Kerala Independent Fisher Workers Federation was significant among fisher folk organizations. It was an apolitical organization. It is affiliated to political party in 1977. So in 1978, Fisher Folks Union of Goa, Tamil Nadu, Kerala and other states formed confederation which came to be called as National Fishermen's Forum, NFF, National Fishermen's Forum. Like trade union, all India level federation, the fisher folks have organized the national level forum comprising of the provincial and regional unions. Collective actions or movements of fisher folk. Some examples. Since 1960s, there have been agitations of the fisher folks in different forms and degrees in the coastal states of the country on some of the issues which are discussed earlier, but it was only from the year 1980s that fisher folks movement took a concrete shape. But Professor John Kurian points out that fisher folks organizations have been concerned more about the allocation of resources and management of fisheries than about their exploitation by the middlemen, merchants, and moneylenders. He further points out that the development work among the fisher folks by the government is projected oriented, not people of community oriented. Kerala. The first major organized movement of the fisher folks in Kerala was in form of protest against the introduction of trawlers, which took place in the late 1970 ଦଶକରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ trawler means a motorized high power motorized boat with all security features, a vessel to catch fish in the deep sea introduced. Then the the fishing community organized a mass protest. This was consequential to the changes which were a result of the intervention in the early 1960s of the non-fishermen investors in the fisheries economy streams, of which Kerala is among the richest producer, has traditionally been consumed in the Southeast Asian countries rather than in Kerala. ସେ ସମୟରେ non-fisher community, fisher folk ବାହାରର ଧନିକ ଶ୍ରେଣୀର ଲୋକେ ଶ୍ରିମ୍ପ ଅର୍ଥାତ ଜାଆଁଳ ଉତ୍ପାଦନରେ, ଫିସିଂ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟରେ, ଟ୍ରଲର ଆଦି ନିୟୋଜିତ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ବିପୁଳ ଇନଭେଷ୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ କଲେ। ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଇଣ୍ଟ୍ରୁଜନ ହେଲା, ଅନୁପ୍ରବେଶ ହେଲା, ତା ବିରୋଧରେ ଫିସିଂ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି organized mass protest. Again in 1981, the KSMTF organized demonstration at the focal points of the 16-kilometer coastlines in order to catch the attention of the policymakers and planners. The demonstration saw the participation of all age groups, which included a large number of women. The main demands of the agitators include exclusive fishing zone for the small-scale fisher folks, a closed season for the trawling operation during monsoon month of June to July. You know, trawler is a high power motorized vessel boat to venture into the sea or into the deep sea for fishing purpose. Due to the movement of the operation of trawler, a large number of fish die. ବହୁ ସଂଖ୍ୟାରେ ଜଳଚର ଜୀବ ମୃତ୍ୟୁବରଣ କରନ୍ତି ଟ୍ରଲର ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟ ଫଳରେ। ତେଣୁ ଟ୍ରଲର पर्टिकुलर इन ब्रीडिंग सीजन ड्यूरिंग श्रिम्प्स ଯେତେବେଳେ ଜାଳ ଉତ୍ପାଦନ ହୁଅନ୍ତି ଏଇ ମେ ଜୁନ ଜୁଲାଇ ଏ ଯୋଉ ହାଇ ପିକ୍ ସିଜନରେ ସେ ସମୟରେ ଟ୍ରଲର ଚଳାଚଳକୁ ବନ୍ଦ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ ଦାବି ଉପସ୍ଥାପନ କରାଯାଇଥିଲା। ଏ ଟୋଟାଲ ban on the pursue sinner operations and other demands for greater welfare measures for fish workers as their fifthly as the traditional rights to sea value system and the technologies have undergone changes to their disadvantage and as they were denied their rights to sell fixed price and distribute the fish in the market in the post-independent period, the fisher folk organizations also demanded that their indigenous values, technologies and rights be restored. Classical fishing and classical marketing, selling of fish items should be protected was their demand. The movement met with the resistance of lobbies of the investors, intermediaries and trawler boats owners association. Towards the end of 1980s, the case MPF took up new demands. Other demands were, new demands were only active fishermen should be given ownership of fishing assets. Secondly, asking the government to take legal action against the trawler under the KMFR Act. So, in this way, the fisher folks movement in Chilika Lake anti-prawn culture agitation. Chilika Lake was a reference point of the fisher folks movement in 1999. Chilika Lake, known for the largest brackish water in Asia, is a source of livelihood to a large number of the fisher folk of Odisha. Chilika Lake was declared as wetland of international importance by the Ramar Convention. The lake is also habitat of a large variety of biodiversity, including dolphins and different migratory birds. Since 1992, an NGO, Odisha Krushak Mahasangha, with Banko Bihari Das as its president, had helped to organize local fishing communities around Chilika with the help of Mangrove Action Project. The fisher folks launched agitation in Odisha against the shrimp farming in Chilika Lake in 1990. The organizations which took lead in the Chilika Matsyajivi Mahasangha National Fisher Works Forum, NFF India. And it took a violent turn at that time, and out of this violent agitation, number of 4 fisher folks were killed and 13 were seriously injured. The fisher folks destroyed large number of prawn, माने चिंगुड़ी जान उत्पादन ପାଇଁ जो घेरी करा जाइथिला ता विरुद्ध रे कृषक समाज चिलिका रे आंदोलन करथिले एवं सेथिरे से माने हिंसात्मक भाव से आंदोलन को परिचालना करी बहु संख्यक चिंगुड़ी जाल उत्पादनकारी घेरी को उच्छेद कर देथिले। तेणु एई भली भाव फिशर फोक्स मानकर आंदोलन आरंभ होइथिला, सोशल मूवमेंट आरंभ होइथिला इन डिफरेंट पार्ट ऑफ द कंट्री एंड फिशर folk arose to social movement through this procedure. Next, unit 16, environmental and ecological movement. Paribesh Andolana, environmental. You know, environment, environment, what is environment? You know, environment is a very burning issue in the present day world. You know what is environment? Environment relates to the entire physical surrounding and conditions which affect, which influence human life or life on earth. यार अर्थ होची मनुष्य चारि पाखरे थिबा समस्त सामाजिक अर्थनैतिक जैविक भौतिक रासायनिक अवस्थार समारोह होची आम परिवेश अर्थात शॉर्टली पर्टिकुलरली वायु जल मूर्तिका प्राणी जगत उद्भिद जगत ये समस्त परिवेशर अंतर्भुक्त and what is then the movement ecological movement it refers to the collective actions of various social groups it refers to means ecological or environmental movement refer to collective actions of various social groups and protection and recognition of constitutional and democratic rights of the subaltern masses, control over their resources, right of indigenous people to preserve their culture, protection of environment, and maintenance of ecological balance. Ecological balance. You know, the concerns of human environment received spectacular attention of scholars at the United Nations Conference on Human Environment held at Stockholm in 1972. In 1972, by the 1980s, the Green Movement became a worldwide phenomenon encompassing various countries of the world, including India. Several movements have taken place for the protection of environmental and ecological rights in India. Eco Greens or Green Movement in Germany and North America. The genesis of the environmental movement in India can be traced to the Chipko movement in 1973 in Garhwal region in the new states of Uttaranchal. Chipko movement. In fact, between 1970s, 70 दशक एवं 80 दशक there were several struggles in India around issues of rights to forest and water, which raised larger ecological concern like rights of communities in forest resources, sustainability of large scale environmental projects like dams, issues of displacement and rehabilitation, etc. The Indian environmental movement is critical of the colonial model of development pursued by the post-colonial state. The post-independent state failed to build up a development agenda based on the needs of the people and continued to advocate the modern capitalist agenda which led to the destruction of environment. The continuance of the colonial model of development by the government of Free India destructed the environmental setup in India. As a result, there was a concern to protect environment and to uphold the ecological balance in India. The formation of national parks, sanctuaries, protected areas in India in fact represents the conventional environmentalism which the Indian state advocated with the aim of preserving wildlife and biodiversity by pushing people out of these areas. In response to this conventional environmentalism, which considered the Indian state to be the custodian of natural resources, the environmental movement in India advocated the ideology of environmentalism of the poor. Unlike in the West, a significant characteristic of environmental movements in India is that they have mainly involved in the women, the poor, the disadvantaged masses who have been directly affected or are victims of environmental degradation. Thus, these movements are primarily political expressions of the struggle of local communities and people who are victims of environmental degradation of or abuse of resources. Gadgil and Guha identify four broad strands within the environmental movements in India based on vision, ideology, and strategy. The first type are those which emphasize on the moral necessity to restrain overuse and ensure justice to the poor and marginalized. Mainly Gandhians belong to this strand. Second strand stresses on the need to dismantle the unjust social order through struggle. Marxists mostly follow this stand. The third and fourth stands advocate a reconstruction employing technologies appropriate to the given context and time. So there is number of issues, categories, so as examples of environmental movements which have taken place in India, forest and land-based movement, issues were right of access to forest resources, Chipko movement, Apiko movement, tribal movement all over the country. There was a national fishermen's forum working for traditional fisher folk in Kerala, Chilika, Bachao Andolon, Odisha, industrial pollution purpose re Bhopal movement, Silent Valley movement in KSSP, Narmada Bachao Andolon movement against Tehri by Tehri Band. These are the examples. Jana Andolon against the Doon Valley anti-bauxite mine movement, Balco project in Odisha, protest and demands of Konkan Railway Action Committee, citizens group against Goa, Amaravati Bachao Andolon, anti-missile test range movement in Baliapal, in Odisha, and many more. The popular movements, anti-dam movements caused due to the environment population, the Chipko movement, it was the movement to protect environment, environmental protection. It is ascribed to the Chipko movement in central Himalayan region in early 1970s. Chipko movement launched to protect the Himalayan forests from destruction It has its roots in the pre-independence days. Many struggles were organized to protect against the colonial forest policy during the early decades of 20th century. The Chipko movement took place during 1973. The forest department refused to allot ash trees to the ash trees to the Dasauli Gram Swaraj Sangha, a local cooperative organization based on Chamoli districts for making agricultural implements. So that the Chipko movement started, and the this first aspect, the first aspect of Chipko movement involved involvement of women in the contribution of households, subsistence, and the overwhelming support of anti-alcohol campaign led to the overwhelming support of women, which is unique to the Chipko movement. The second aspect is with the regard to the nature of agitation. Unlike other environmental movements, Chipko are strictly adhered to the Gandhian tradition of freedom struggle, that is non-violence. Third, nature was simplicity and sincerity of the leaders like Sundarlal Bahuguna, and their access to national leaders like Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Other politicians and officials also helped to success the movement to a large extent. The demands of Chipko movement was complete stoppage of cutting trees for commercial purposes. The traditional lights should be organized on the basis of minimum needs of the people, making the arid forest green by increasing people's participation in tree cultivation, formation of village committees to manage forests, development of the forest-related home-based industries, making available the raw materials money taking over in. Lastly or fifthly, giving priority to afforestation in the light of local conditions, requirement and varieties. Another movement is Apiko movement. Apiko movement, like Chipko movement, was Western Ghats in Uttar Kannada regions of Karnataka. It was started in the year 1983 for the destruction of forest was caused due to commercial felling of trees for timber extraction, and there was massive movement to protect the forest. Another was Narmada Bachao Andolon. Narmada Bachao Andolon in in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra. It was organized to protect the ecosystem in these three decades, these three states, and to protect the Narmada River, Narmada, and its basin, the forest surroundings. Sardar Sarovar project, which is an interstate multi-purpose project with a terminal major dam in Gujarat, is being built on river Narmada, the fifth largest river in India. You know, Narmada Valley project with its two mega projects, Sardar Sarovar project, Narmada Sagar project in Madhya Pradesh, is the largest single river valley project with the objective of making world's largest man-made lake. So that out of this activity, out of this endeavor, the ecology system in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh could face massive destruction. There was a movement to protect Narmada Bachao Andolon. Medha Patkar was the social activist was its leader. And the achievements of The Narmada Bachao Andolan was the exit of the World Bank from Sardar Sarovar project in 1993. Halt of Sardar Sarovar construction in 94 to 99. Withdrawal of foreign investors from Mysore Dam in 1999 to 2001. Urban-based environmental movement, the protection of environment did not form significant part or policies of the state. There are due to the industrialization process, there was massive fell down of trees in cities. The environmental pollution, there was a disaster in environmental pollution, continuous immigration of the people from rural areas to the cities, their habitat in the congested areas, which exist along with the polluting small scale industries, increasing number of vehicles and unplanned expansion of cities, open drainage have created level of environmental hazards. This pollution made people susceptible to multiple diseases. Delhi is one of the most polluted cities in the world due to this. There are air pollution due to vehicular emission, industrial emission, water pollution in Jamuna river. So, as a result of this, there was upsurge among social activists, the environmentalists, to protect environmental pollution and environmental protection, ecosystem protection of ecosystem biodiversity was it is a burning topic and burning issue also to protect world from the global warming and different disasters. The last unit, social movement and democracy, social movements and democracy and assessment. You know, relation in this unit we shall study the relationship between democracy with social movement. You know, people are central in the democratic system. People are central in democratic system. Democracy, a Greek, a Greek born in Greek comes from the Greek word demos means people, kratos means authority. It is the people's government, the definition of Abraham Lincoln. Democracy is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. It means the rule of the people or the exclusive power of the state resides with the people themselves. People have the right and authority to change their rulers constitutionally and to choose their rulers also constitutionally. अर्थात गणतंत्र एभली एक शासन व्यवस्था जो सरकार जनसाधारण द्वारा प्रतिष्ठा होता है, जनसाधारण कार्य करता है, जनसाधारण मतरे ही परिचालित होता है, जनसाधारण रेस्पॉन्सिबल होता है, जनसाधारण निकट में रेस्पॉन्सिबल होता है. People are central in the democratic system, but people are not homogeneous. In a stratified society, there are some people who are economically, social, and politically very powerful. And on the other hand, many people are powerless. Though there is a democracy in a state, still political participation and the scope of participation in democracy is not equal for all people residing in a state. गोटे राष्ट्र रे बसवास करथवा समस्त जनसाधारण गणतांत्रिक प्रक्रिया रे जदिओ ଆଇନଗତ ଏବଂ ସାମ୍ବିଧାନିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ସମ ପରିମାଣରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବାର ସୁଯୋଗ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରାଯାଇଛି, ତଥାପି ସାମାଜିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିକୋଣରୁ ଆର୍ଥିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିକୋଣରୁ ସମାଜରେ ଏକ ବହୁ ସଂଖ୍ୟକ ଜନସାଧାରଣ ଗରିବ ଅସହାୟ ଥିବା ଯୋଗୁଁ ସେମାନେ ଧନିକ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତି ମାନଙ୍କ ତୁଳନାରେ ସମ ପରିମାଣରେ ସରକାର ଗଠନ, ସରକାର ପରିଚାଳନା ଏବଂ ସରକାର ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟାରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବାକୁ ସକ୍ଷମ ହୁଅନ୍ତି। Many people are powerless. They depend on the powerful people for their economic survival. ଏହା ହେଉଛି କାରଣ ସେମାନେ ନିର୍ଭର କରନ୍ତି, ଯେହେତୁ ସେମାନଙ୍କ ନିକଟରେ ମିନିମମ୍ ନିଡ୍ ଫୁଲଫିଲମେଣ୍ଟ ପାଇଁ କୌଣସି ସାଧନ ନାହିଁ, ସେଥିପାଇଁ ସେମାନେ ଧନିକ ଶ୍ରେଣୀର ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ସଦା ସର୍ବଦା ନିର୍ଭରଶୀଳ ହୋଇଛନ୍ତି। They depend on the powerful for their economic survival. People of different social and economic strata have different interests. They have different life chances. Their perception of the system differs. In such a stratified and plural society, the term people became complex and elusive. The term people has heterogeneous implications. You know ingredients of a democracy. Democracy has three essential and overlapping ingredients. One is political institutions. Secondly, it is political process. Third one is substantial functioning. Third one is substantial functioning. What is political institutions? You know, political institutions are known as the legislature or the executive, which create scope for the people, which provide scope for the people to participate directly or indirectly in the decision making process. The political institutions such as electoral system and legislature, both electoral system and legislature are known as political institutions. They provide an opportunity, a scope, or a mechanism for the people to participate directly or indirectly in the decision making process. Political institution means this. Political process refers to politics. Politics means conflict and struggle of interests and ideologies. Politics is concerned with the control over resources, their use and distribution. And then the substantial, what is substantial functioning? Objectives of the political institutions are to cater to the needs and aspirations of the people. It should function and aim at development of all and not one or small section of society. In that sense, democratic system in developing societies in the third world is a process of social transformation, so that all citizens can participate in the system with equal capability. But it is a far-reaching goal, a far-reaching concept. Institution limitations for formal democracy. Institutions are mechanism to attain certain objectives. They are structured in terms of composition of membership, organizational system, locating power and responsibility, duties, control and over resources, procedures for functioning to take decisions and carrying out responsibility, are formed in context of times and objective. In time and objective. In a democratic setup, various institutions manage social affairs on behalf of the people. The system provides opportunities to express their desires, grievances, and problems to their representatives through periodical elections. People can change their representatives in elections, but according to certain scholars, direct collective actions in the form of mass movement is anti-democratic. The functioning of the democratic system during the last 5 decades has brought certain positive transformation in our society, in our traditional hierarchical society. ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଯେଉଁ ସୋପାନଯୁକ୍ତ ସମାଜ ପାରମ୍ପରିକ ଭାବରେ ଆମର ଥିଲା, ସ୍ୱାଧୀନ ଭାରତରେ ଯେଉଁ ବିକାଶର ଧାରା କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କଲା, ତା ଦ୍ୱାରା ସେ traditional structure of society changed. Particularly, the social order has been delegitimized. The rule of law, equal citizenship, social and economic equality have been codified in legal system and are accepted as moral principle to be maintained and attained. In the process, political positions are no longer the sole prerogative of upper caste. Also, there has been decline of the authority of upper caste in politics in India. There has been the upper caste, the Brahmins. There is a decline of Brahmin dominant politics in India. Middle and lower castes have challenged their power. A group through Tini from the lowest social strata, Dalitas and tribals have also emerged as a political elite and get some share in decision making of the state. Thus, circle of political elite has enlarged. Many scholars such as Huntington, Rajni Kothari, and several others observes that as the gap between expectations of the people and performance of the system widens, mass upsurge in the forms of movement increase. ଯେତେବେଳେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ଏବଂ ସରକାରଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଜନସାଧାରଣଙ୍କର ଆଶା ଆକାଂକ୍ଷା ବୃଦ୍ଧି ହୁଏ, ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ସେ ସବୁ ଆଶା ଆକାଂକ୍ଷାକୁ ପୂରଣ କରି ନପାରେ, ସେତେବେଳେ ଜନସାଧାରଣଙ୍କ ମନରେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ବିରୋଧରେ ବା ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ନିଜର ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥ ହାସଲ ପାଇଁ, ନିଜର ଦାବି ହାସଲ ପାଇଁ, ନିଜର ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ ହାସଲ ପାଇଁ mass rising create हुए, and that is then turned into collective action known as social movement. Rajni Kothari also believes that democracy in India has become a playground for growing corruption, criminalization, repression, intimidation of large masses of the people. ଭାରତରେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ର ରେ corruption, criminalization, intimidation, repression ଗୋଟିଏ ଗୋଟିଏ ଚରିତ୍ର ପାଲଟି ଯାଇଛି ବୋଲି ବିଶିଷ୍ଟ ସ୍କଲାର ରଜନୀ କୋଠାରୀ କହନ୍ତି. There is discontent and despair in the air, still highly diffuse, fragmented and unorganized. ଏଭଳି ଏକ ଭାରତୀୟ ଶାସନ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଅଛି, ଯଦିଓ ସମ୍ବିଧାନ ଏକ ବିଶାଳ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଗଢ଼ି ତୋଳିଛି, ତଥାପି ଭାରତୀୟ ଶାସନ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ যেভাবে ভাবে করপশন হচ্ছে, ক্রিমিনালাইজেশন হচ্ছে, রিপ্রেশন হচ্ছে, ইন্টিমিডেশন হচ্ছে, জনসাধারণଙ୍କର যেভাবে ଯେଉଁ ଆବଶ୍ୟକୀୟ ସଶକ୍ତର ମାଧ୍ୟମ ସାଧନର ଅଭାବ ରହିଛି, ସେ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ସମସ୍ତେ ସମ ପରିମାଣରେ ଶାସନ ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟାରେ, ଗଣତାନ୍ତ୍ରିକ ପ୍ରକ୍ରିୟାରେ, ଗଣତାନ୍ତ୍ରିକ ଧାରାରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ସମ୍ଭବପର ହେଉନାହିଁ। ଡ୍ୟୁ ଟୁ ଏହି କାରଣ ପାଇଁ ଭାରତରେ ବହୁତ ଗୁଡ଼ିଏ जन आंदोलन है, सोशल मूवमेंट है, नंबर एंड कवरेज ऑफ सोशल मूवमेंट्स इन डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स हैव इंक्रीज्ड इन ऑल सोसाइटीज इंक्लूडिंग इन डेमोक्रेटिक सिस्टम, so that the parliamentary form of government, in India there has been an indirect democracy in form of a parliamentary system of government. In parliamentary system of government there is number of opportunity for political participation. India is a federal state, federal structure. There is also the Panchayat Raj system. Democratically, these systems are operating constitutionally with constitutional status and with a vast scope of participation. The Indian people are not participating in the same status with each other. The electoral system, political parties, established trade unions do not provide space to the masses to bring social transformation. In their place, there is emerging a new arena of counter action, a counter availing tendencies, a counter cultural movements, and more generally, a counter challenge to existing paradigms of thought and action. So that, before independence, Dr. Ambedkar organized a number of movements of Dalits against untouchability, and in different parts of country there were social movements against discrimination, movement against democracy. There was number of movements also. So that the core of the subject is that in spite of the system, in spite of the constitutional sanction, if the government of a state, when fails to adhere to redress the expectation of the people, the upsurge and social movements take place, and if there is discrimination, the social movements become massive and long-standing. This is all about the units we have completed, units from 13 to 17. 13 to 17, 5 units. This time we shall go for doubt clearing session. The students who have any doubt may ask, we can discuss it. Students, you may ask. Hello students. Others who have any doubt may ask. Thank you, Vishwakalpita. Sir, perhaps the students have no doubt. Unit 16. Unit 16. Environmental and ecological movement. You know, the protection of environment is very necessary for the existence of life on earth. There should be the the regulation to maintain ecosystem, to maintain biodiversity. When there is any environmental degradation, there is movement in India. There are number of movements, you know, Chipko movement, Apicko movement, Narmada Bachao Andolon. In Chilika Lake, there is anti-prawn shrimp movement. All these movements were to protect environment. Environment protection is everyone's responsibility. What is environment? You know it better. Where there is the any harm to environment, the life come to a danger mode, so that the environmental like persons always have tried to protect their environment from intruders, and there were number of movements during the post independent India, and the number of the projects, the developmental projects, the irrigation projects, the dam projects, the environmental, the different establishment of expansion of different cities, particularly Delhi. There was the degradation of danger to existence of environmental protection, so that there are number of development environmental movements and also ecological movement. And particularly we have studied Chipko movement, Apicko movement, Narmada Bachao movement, or urban based movement. These are about environmental and ecological movement. It is about unit 16. It is about in unit 16. Minakshi Pradhan, it is about unit 16. Then
Okay, sir.
sir,
Let us close. Let us wind up.
sir, thank you, sir. Thank you, dear learners. Today we have completed MPSE 007, and on Saturday, 18th of this month, we shall complete MPSE 003. The rest units of MPSE 003. Sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
dear
sir.
learners.
Good night, sir. Good night,
Okay,
dear
thank you.
learners.
Good night.
Sir.